Welcome to Detroit. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass. You can drown them. And that's what we gotta be. That's who we have to be. Because that's our domain. That is our domain. Because we'll tread water as long as it takes to fucking bury you.
Takes the snap, turns, gives to Montgomery, right side, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions! Yes.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. So folks, obviously we know that today is the first day of padded practice for the Detroit Lions. And in today's episode, what we're going to talk about is physicality. We're going to talk about intensity. And we're going to talk about how that physicality, how that intensity is something that, in my honest opinion, is very foreboding as far as what the NFL is going to be in store for from the Detroit Lions for the upcoming season. Now, let's understand something here. The Detroit Lions are a team that over the last couple of years has been known for being one of the most physical, one of the most intense teams, not only in terms of practice, but also in terms of on the field. And what I mean by that is that when you take a look at the last couple of days at training camp, head coach Dan Campbell has literally had to stop practice on 2 separate days because the practices were getting too physical. And the reason why, obviously, Dan Campbell wants to do that, obviously why Dan Campbell has to do that, I should rather say, is because obviously for the past few days, it's like, listen, we're here to practice, we're obviously here to get better, but we have to keep things in check. We can't be too physical. We can't be breaking the rules. And those are the rules that the NFL has put into place. So it's like, okay, here, it's like, yeah, we're in training camp. Obviously, these guys are chomping at the bit. They're wanting to get going. They're wanting to, just let loose. But at the same time, Dan Campbell is like, listen, we don't want to be getting fines. We don't want to have forfeitures of picks or whatever the hell else the NFL might try to, impose for breaking the rules. So it's like, okay, for those first couple of days, Dan Campbell has had to kind of put almost a little bit of a leash on the players, ensuring that, okay, yeah, you guys are here to practice, you guys are here to get better, but we cannot let ourselves go completely all out just yet. But that's going to change today because now when you put the pads on, there's no more checks. There's no more limitations. It's like, okay, we are now full go and it is about as close as you're going to get to actual game mode without it actually being in game. And that's why I say when you take a look at this first training camp practice, the kid gloves, they are officially coming off because the Lions will now have their first chance to, put the pads on. They'll be able to actually hit. They'll be able to actually, go full out in terms of intensity. And I'm telling you this right now. The first padded practice, the first time you're actually able to put the full ensemble of pads on, shoulder pads, knee pads, thigh pads, the whole thing, those practices are extremely, extremely intense. And as I've stated, over the years, the Lions have garnered this reputation for being extremely physical and downright intense. And because of that, they have gained also a reputation of being intimidating. And I'm going to say this right now. Some people, while they might like that kind of old school intensity, they might like that old school intimidation, there are some teams that will take that intensity, they'll take that intimidation, that physicality, and they say, oh, well, the Lions are just a dirty team. The Lions play dirty. The Lions try to hurt people, blah, 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 blah. We've heard this accusation from the Rams and also from the Bears. And that's mostly who we've heard it from, which I find kind of rather interesting because it's like, well, one of those teams plays in the same division that we do, which, funny enough, that division is called the Black and Blue division. And, well, the Rams, I find it kind of funny that they're going to be the first ones to accuse us of, playing dirty when, again, we've been playing within the rules that the NFL itself has set up. But again, whenever it happens out on the field, people will be the first ones out there to say, oh, well, that's a dirty player, that's a cheap shot, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, first and foremost, you have to understand what is a dirty play, what is a cheap shot, first and foremost, per the NFL rules, but then also, what was the intent of the play? Was the player actually trying to physically hurt the other person, or it's like, hey, per the rules, this is the only option I've got. And you guys know exactly who I'm referring to here. I'm referring to Kirby Joseph and how the label has been thrown at him that he is a dirty player because of the fact that how the rules are set up, he has to go low, he has to tackle players low because, there's not really much else that he can do. But getting back to the physicality and the intensity in terms of training camp, again, like I said, over the first couple of days, practice had to be stopped twice by Coach Campbell. And yesterday's practice was stopped after Amon-Ra St. Brown and Brian Branch, they got into a few physical back and forths, and they weren't wanting to back down from the other player. And, you have to understand what this actually means in terms of the training camp practices. Because, when everybody hears about this, they think there might be some bad blood, there might be something that's going on. And let's be honest, that's almost seldom, if ever, the case. Most of the time, and especially in the case that we're talking about with the Detroit Lions, when you have two guys that are very competitive, they're very physical at what they do, they're not trying to do that in any sort of malicious way. They're just doing that in pure brotherly competition to drive the other person to be better. And that's what makes the Lions who they are, is that, listen, they can go out on the field, they can get physical, they can go out and be, very intense with each other, but at the same time, they're not doing so to try and hurt the other person. They're not trying to make the other person look bad. If anything, what they're trying to do is they're like, hey, I want you to be the best version of yourself so that way I can be the best version of myself. And by doing that, it makes the team better overall. And when you take a look at this whole idea of physicality, intensity, this concept of being as physical as possible, as being as intense as possible, it's something that has completely infested the Lions camp because players are not just only pushing themselves to be better individually, but by doing so, they want to push other players, they want to push their other teammates to get better as fast and as good as possible. And again, you have to do that at least in the ramp-up period as far as the practices are concerned with limitations. Again, that's why I said Dan Campbell has to, in some instances, put these guys a little bit on a leash in the first couple of days. But that leash, those limitations, those things are going to be gone now. They're not going to have to deal with that with the pads being on, because when the pads are on, it's pretty much game on. And this intense physicality that the Lions have, like I said, I believe it is a foreboding message to the NFL because you have to understand something here. Obviously, football is a very intense, it's a very physically demanding sport, and as such, it's going to have injury factors. And I know obviously a lot of Lions fans, they're tired of hearing about injuries, they're very wary of injuries, they think that injuries are, anytime we hear about a player leaving practice that, oh my God, it's just the end of the world, we're having another infestation of the injury bug. Oftentimes when players get injuries in practice, it's usually not as bad as what people think it is. It might be a sprain, a strain, maybe a dislocation, but seldom is it ever something is tore or something is going to be broken. But that does happen. But again, as Dan Campbell said back in the 2002 Hard Knocks period, it's like, listen, I have to get you guys physically ready for the rigors of the NFL season. And I can't do that with kid gloves. I've got to make sure that we are physically going hard, that we are hitting in practice, that we are putting ourselves in a position to be ready for that. And it's like, listen, you would love it if you never had to hear about a player getting injured in camp. You would love to hear that, no players got injured during practice. You didn't have to worry about somebody having some, little ache or pain or some sort of, they were kind of like banged up about, this, that, or the other thing. You would love to hear that all the time. But that's not something that's going to happen. So the Lions, knowing that, they're going to be like, listen, we're not going to be soft. We're not going to be lackadaisical with our approach when it comes to practice and when it comes to camp. If anything, the Lions don't just look for being physical, they relish in it. They absolutely desire to be as physical as possible to intimidate opponents and to get as, good as possible to physically intimidate those opponents. And I'm telling you this right now, when the Lions go and they're physical and they're intense, they go harder than anybody else. I'd be absolutely surprised if you were to go to all 31 other freaking practices, training camps around the NFL. I do not think you'd be able to find a more physically intense, a more physically demanding training camp than probably what the Detroit Lions have. And that's by design. That's by design of what Dan Campbell wants, but it's also by design of what the players want. And by doing so, it puts them in a really unique position in today's NFL when everything is about load bearing, everything is about, okay, we don't want to overstrain the players. The players are like, listen, don't treat us with kid gloves. Don't try and limit what we can and can't do. We know ourselves. We know what our bodies can and can't do. We want to go out there and we want to actually put our best foot forward. Now, obviously, if somebody gets injured, obviously they're going to follow the trainers. They're going to follow doctors' advice, and they're going to work themselves back into it. But as long as they're full go, they're full go. And when you think about it, you have to, go based upon what some of the players have said, what some of the coaches have said, how they've acted, how they've approached certain things. And again, what I'm specifically talking about here is some of the things that we have heard from various interviews, media sessions over the last couple of days. Yesterday, Tate Ratledge was in a media session, and one of the things that was being talked about was how, what's different or what's similar in terms to this training camp practice now that this is your first time being in the NFL versus when you were at Georgia, versus when you were in college. And Tate Ratledge just put it out there very, very plainly. He put it out there very simply. He's like, listen, I love the physicality. I love the fact that we're physical. I love the fact that we're intense. He was like, it's very, very similar in the mindset and in the approach to what it was like at Georgia. So he absolutely loves it, and he wouldn't change anything about it. And again, offensive linemen, they have to be physical. They are constantly, every single play, going to be getting down and dirty with, opposing NFL defensive linemen, linebackers, whatever the case is. So for them, physicality is part of the job description, even more so than other NFL players. But for Tate Ratledge, it's like, listen, I relish in the ability to get physical with somebody else. I relish in the ability to bring everything I have to physically impose myself and dominate across somebody else on the line. You then go to one of the coaches, you go to Kelvin Shepard, or as they like to call him, Shep. Spoke about in his media session, I think it was early yesterday, about how on defense, he wants everybody on that defense to be in this dog mindset, to constantly want to attack, to inflict pain, to inflict punishment as much as possible. But at the same time, while being physical, while being intense, they want to get turnovers. They want to be able to help out the offense by getting those turnovers, giving the ball back to the offense so then they can score points. And you have to think about this. The ability to physically impose yourself, whether it's offense or defense, but then also doing so intelligently is something that really separates the Lions from other teams, because it's like, listen, they're not all brain, they're not all brawn. They are a very healthy balance of the two. And having that healthy balance, having the ability to play loose and play all 100% out, but also be as intelligent about it as the way they have been, that really separates them. And again, that is something I believe we're going to see as the training camp period continues to go on further. The next person we can look to is Jared Goff. Jared Goff, in his media session yesterday and also in other media sessions, has spoken about how intense practice is. But in yesterday's media session, he specifically was talking or was asked about the defensive backs, about how, how they're playing, how they're doing. Are they making things difficult for him and the wide receivers? And he noted about how physical they're being, about how intense they're being in terms of their coverage and being sticky in their coverage, being able to read and, understand what it is the offense and Goff and the wide receivers are wanting to do. And you look at that information, you understand that information, that has a twofold effect. Number one fold that it does is that by having that physical, intense preparation that those defensive backs have, it's going to make things more difficult for Jared Goff because it means, okay, you know what? I've got to be more precise with my throws. I got to make sure I'm reading the coverage right. That's only going to get him better. That's only going to get him more in game mode, in season mode for when it's actually time to play. And then when you take a look at it from the defensive backs, by constantly being in that mindset of, hey, we're going to be physical, we're going to be in their face, we're going to have tight, sticky coverage, that means that, hey, once again, once the regular season actually hits, they're going to be able to just step right into what they're doing. And, well, let's consider it for what it is. You have guys like Terry Arnold, you have DJ Reed, you have freaking Kirby Joseph, you have Brian Branch, Amik Robertson, Avonte Maddox, Rock Ya-Sin. We have all these guys in the defensive backfield, and a lot of these guys are really good players. They're top-notch players. Branch and Kirby, best safety duo in the NFL. DJ Reed, a top 10 freaking cornerback. Terry Arnold has made immense, huge strides this offseason, according to Kelvin Shepard. So you've got that whole group that's going up against Jared Goff, a top 10 fringe top 5 quarterback. You've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, top 10 fringe top 5 wide receiver. J-Mo, who's set to have an explosive breakout year this year. Sam Laporta, who's a top 3 tight end, top 5 tight end. You got all of those offensive weapons that are going up against, and that's also including Jahmyr Gibbs and, Isaac Tesla and also, freaking Tim Patrick. All of that is also going against that defensive backfield. So all of that talent is constantly working on the other side of the ball. And again, as the saying goes, sharpening each other, iron sharpens iron. Again, you have these guys that are constantly pushing the other to get better, and it puts them well out in front of how other teams are going to be able to be prepared for when the regular season actually starts. And then you take a look at Dan Campbell. Again, I've said this before, and we all know this. Dan Campbell is a guy that absolutely values a physical and imposing team. And while, again, he's had to lay down the law in the past, especially over the last couple of days, to make sure, hey, you know what, we have to keep things within the rules. We can't go totally off the rails just yet. You have to understand that while he has to do that, I guarantee you this, he is absolutely brimming inside with excitement and pride and is happy to know that his players are naturally looking forward to wanting to be on the field in pads. They're wanting to put all the intensity out there. They are absolutely chomping at the bit. They're itching and raring to go to just let fully loose. And again, the reason why I say all this is a foreboding message for the NFL is you have to take a look at some of those defenses that I've talked about in the past that are not only very, very physical, but they're very intelligent. They are able to not only beat you with how well they prepare in terms of the mental aspect, but they're also able to beat you down because they do not give a damn. They will physically just bury you. Defenses like the Steel Curtain from the 1970s, I'm referring to the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Ravens defense of the 2000s, they've had a great defense for a number of years, but that 2000s defense, absolutely just ridiculous. And then you take a look at the Seahawks defense from the early 2010s or most of the 2010s. Again, that was a defense that, again, played very physical, but was also very intelligent. And when you take a look at those defenses that I just mentioned, they played with a mindset that it all starts in practice. Hey, we have constantly got to have our mind, and we've constantly got to make sure that we are playing as physical and as intelligent as possible, so that way, hey, when it does come time for the game, when we do actually step out on the game field, it can translate seamlessly. And like I said, when you can not only, combine the intellectual component with the physical component, you not only beat that team down physically, but you outsmart them as well. And that is a deadly combo to have when you have not only equal measure of both brawn, but also brain. So for me, it's like, okay, the Lions defense and the Lions team in general, offense, defense, special teams, the whole 9 yards, their physicality, their intensity, it sets them apart. And it sets them apart in a number of ways. And when you start ramping up things in training camp like we're about to do today, all that's going to do is make things that much better for the team. Again, I understand some people are worried about injuries, but let's be fair and honest with ourselves. It's part of the game, and again, usually injuries are not as bad as what they are initially broadcast or initially put out to be. I know a lot of people heard about yesterday, oh, you know what, Terry and Arnold left practice with a leg injury, or Derek Barnes left practice with a hand injury. Let's call it for what it is. That leg injury was a strained muscle. That's not that bad. The hand injury, probably not that bad. And I guarantee you this, a hand injury is not going to keep Derek Barnes off the field for long, or it's not going to keep him from playing games if needed. Again, that's my whole point. These Lions players, they are so physical, they are so dedicated to their craft and playing that unless it's pretty much loss of life, limb, or eyesight, or they just physically cannot actually get out on the field, they're going to be out on the field. They're going to be bringing their A game. They're going to be doing everything they possibly can to bring the physicality and the intensity measure and amp it up as high as possible, all the way to 100. But anyway, folks, I hope you all enjoyed this episode. I hope you all are as excited for training camp to officially, kind of get underway in terms of first padded practice. And obviously, the first preseason game, the Hall of Fame game, is literally about to start here, I think, in about another week. So it's like all this stuff is really starting to come to a head. We're about to get back into actual football. So, having said that, I hope you all enjoyed the episode, and I just want to say thank you all for watching in another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I want to highly encourage all, if you've not done so already, to please subscribe to the channel. But if you subscribe to the channel and you have not yet also done so, I want to also encourage you all, please make sure you hit that bell notification icon so you guys never miss any more content that I push out. Also, please, I hope everybody out there has something in their life that makes them happy, makes them smile. God bless, my friends. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.